So for our YouTube watchers, we now have a graphic of our fixture ticker confirming the fixtures for Game Week 18 and double Game Week 19 as they stand. We probably should point out that these are ever changing and could even change again with the news that Southampton's FA Cup clash against Shrewsbury may need to be rescheduled, which has kind of cast doubt on one of their fixtures also against Leeds. And there's been some kind of murmurings that could be shoved into Game Week 18, but we can only kind of play that by ear.
I think Ben Crellin's take on that is it's unlikely.
Yes,
I think it's possible but unlikely. So I wouldn't panic just yet.
No,
I think what I would say to people though, if you haven't already, hold off pressing the wild card or the free hit button. I think it's fine to do one or two transfers to maybe take you to a -4. Because there's little risk in that, I think. But I would hold off on the free hit and wild card, because worst case scenario, hopefully it doesn't happen. But with the situation in the UK at the moment, it is possible that football could get paused. We are seeing more issues with COVID than we've probably seen at any time, throughout this whole situation. If you look at Derby today, you look at Shrewsbury, Man City have had more positive tests. So it's not good. It's not good, unfortunately. So I think definitely hold your chips, because I think if the precedent that they set last time was that they weren't refund, maybe it's a better word for it, but they weren't refunding any chips or any transfers. So I think I would just hold off. Hopefully it'll be inconsequential, but it's just worth mentioning, I think.
And I think that's a really good point. And even if lesser important, but just as important from a fantasy view, right? So if that Southampton Leeds game, for example, does get moved into Game Week 18, just for example, I've got 2 Leeds players and a Saints player as well. That would change my strategy completely. I would then just play the week out. And if
I think it takes me to 10 players in that case.
I think
I would as well.
10 or 11 as well. So it's worth holding off. So firstly, we've had some questions in around playing Game Week 18 with no chip. So first, we had a member of our Fantasy Football Hub FPL WhatsApp group, Ted Rodner. I'm interested in the opinion of what the minimum number of players they feel they would need for Game Week 18 to not use the free hit chip. So a really, really good question. And also for 19, so the minimum number of playing bench players they still use the bench boost chip for. So let's just focus on Game Week 18 first. So using no chips, what kind of team or setup of numbers, Adam, would you look like, in terms of saving the free hit chip for a different game week?
I think it largely depends on the players that you have. So you could have 9 if it's like Kilman, Mitchell, and play, Brewster, Davis. I think that you may as well not have them playing at all. I think it depends on who you have. So I think the key people that you're going to be worried about not owning this week are going to be Fernandes, KDB. I think you're probably going to want to have a City defender at least. And I think you're probably going to want at least another midfielder who's capable of hauling. So whether it's Grealish, whether it's Sterling, whether it's Rashford, and then I think a couple of strikers that are capable of scoring. I think you can get. So I would say probably 7 is the cut-off point, but 7 key players. I think the reality is, having done the maths, is that if you just have those 7 key players, the reality is you're going to get a red arrow this week, purely because I think a lot of people will free hit this week. That's my view. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, it's a Twitter bubble," but I actually think even a lot of casual players will look at it. I get messages from my friends who I would say are more casual players, asking what to do with their team, and even they've thought about, well, I'm going to free hit this week because of the. So I actually think the free hit percentage will be really high this week. So I think if you've got between, let's say, 6 to 9 players, or you're taking a lot of hits, I think you've got to expect a red arrow this week, but you'll be able to get it back at some point later on in the season. It'll be your turn where you get it. So I think it's really a case of damage limitation. I think realistically, if you've got the key players, you're probably going to be 20 points behind, because if you're looking at it, there might be 4 other players. Let's say they score, between on average 3 to 5 points. That's what you're looking at. So I think if you're in that position, it's damage limitation, but just understand, you'll still have that benefit later on in the season. So if you go back a couple of 100,000 paces, it's no disaster. You're just going to have to, unfortunately, accept accept it this week. I mean, what's your take on it, Fergie?
Yeah, I find your points absolutely right, but I think there are other angles. Your first point, I completely agree. Right, quality over quantity. So I've seen teams, on Twitter and in chats and stuff. I've got 8 or 9. I'm fine, right? And those 8 or 9 include Kilman, Mitchell, Loughton, Brewster. All these players not going to get you. They have probably only got 5 players who who've got a chance of scoring big points, and all the free hitters would all have those players as well, and they're going to have another 5 or 6 very carefully selected players to kind of optimize it. So I would say, in terms of answering Ted's question specifically, I think if you've got seven key players, good players, I think you're okay. But I would also say, and this is maybe a bit more of a psychological thing than anything, that if you wait for your boost further down the line, it could be in Gameweek 26, it could be in Gameweek 29, which we'll touch on in a minute. For me, it depends on kind of where you are in your season and what your goals for the season are, right? But a really nice boost halfway through the season now, putting you up, up into the top, I don't know, few 100,000 or even to the top 100,000, just as an example. I think you would play the game, and your transfers and your mindset would be very, very different moving forward between Game Week 18 and 19 and between Game Week 26 and 29. I think you would make better decisions, and I think it's and for me, rightly or wrongly, this is the way I think about it. It's much easier to stay up there than it is to get up there. So
yeah,
I think
it's very true.
I think there is that factor that if you wait till Game Week 29, your season could be over. If you're ranked 1 million in Game Week 29 and you have a sensational bench boost, free hit, and even if you half your rank, right, and that is a pretty sensational free hit at that time, and you go up to 500,000, you could have already been there at that point and then consolidated your position later down the line. So I think that for me is quite a big factor in why I tend to play my chips maybe a little bit earlier, but it is dependent on your position and dependent on your goals, I feel.
I think that's a really, really good point. And it's actually how I've perceived things with my own situation. So I've always talked about looking maybe every 4 game weeks and setting targets. So I'd set a target to be in the top 250k by game week 16, and it's a top 100k by the end of game week 19, which is the halfway point. So I think I don't think I'll be there unless I use my chips in the next couple of game weeks. So I think it's a really, really good point. And I agree with you on it's definitely the quality. But I even think if you had 7 quality players, it's going to be almost impossible to get a red arrow this week just based on appearance points. You're going to be so. I think if you have that, yes, you can get the advantage later in the season, but just so it doesn't. And it sounds. I think mental health and managing your own expectations in fantasy football is important. So if you do have 7 or 8 players, expect a red arrow, and at least you won't be disappointed. And I think that's. I think it's really important to manage your own expectations.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Just to answer a couple of points in the chat. So Gavino99 disagrees. He says he's saving all the chips later in the season. There's too much going on at the moment with COVID and rotation.
Which is fair. Which is
a fair point. Yeah. Jonespoke79 asks, for a free hit side, is it important to have coverage in all the fixtures given the current situation? Really, really good question. So there's 5 fixtures, isn't there? So I think
6.
I think you mentioned. Oh yes, sorry, it got bumped to 6, didn't it? I think you made this exact point last week, didn't you, about having representation in practically every match?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we'll go through the free hit sides a bit later on, but I think that is definitely my intention. I think there'll be a bit more tweaking from the sides that I've sent to you, but I think it is important because, and I actually think I've got a couple of teams which we'll talk about later. One with Sterling, one with Rashford, and the Rashford one has quite a good playing bench, and I think that could be a
Yeah.
factor of making me go that way, because if one fixture gets taken out or a couple of players go down with COVID, which is, to be honest, I think is becoming more likely. What is it, 2%? What we're looking at, is it 2% of the population, 2% of the, or
Yeah.
it's something ridiculous now that in terms of the infected rate. So I do think it's going to be a bigger issue. We've seen the highest amount of people get tested positive for COVID in the latest batch of testing, and I think that's only going to get worse. So
No,
yeah,
I
it
completely
is
agree.
a good point in the chat, and it is a good point that, you know, I can't argue against the counter argument. I'm saving your chips to later in the season because of you know, we'll maybe get a little bit more certainty. The one thing that we haven't mentioned, there will be a lot of double game weeks in the end of the season. There'll be one big double game week in 26, but there'll be a lot of other scattered double game weeks where one or two teams have got double deck game weeks, potentially Villa, Spurs, City, and which could be great for using some of the chips, maybe like your triple captain and you know, other ones. So yeah, some good points there.
Just some shouts for potential free hit plays. A couple I hadn't thought of actually, but could be really good shouts. The Wallaby Gamer, Richarlison is a free hit option on pens and Hammers is back. That's not a bad shout. He's a pretty decent price. I think he's a 8 million-ish or just under potentially. That is a nice shout. And Marcus, and there was a couple of others up in the chat said Cavani as well. They said, you know, they reckon they missed his movement. So obviously he'll have Burnley next week as well. So that is a potential shout which we can have a chat about a little bit later. I think just for me, just a few points. So I'm pretty pro free hit 18. I've just got a few other points on kind of why I am as well. We've already mentioned about COVID and rotation injuries, things like that, right? So the play, you know, even if you do have 7 key players, right? Even if you do have 7 key players, would you be surprised if 1 or 2 of them were rested, rotated, whether they, you know, were subject to, you know, having to isolate? Then suddenly your 7 key players goes down to maybe 6, maybe 5, maybe even 4, right? So I think that is an important factor as well. I think it's the kind of reverse argument of saving your tips until later. You can have a playing bench on a free hit, whereas obviously you can't if you're only playing 7 players. So I do think that is important, particularly, you know, as in game week 15, I went down 3 in my bench. Last week, as we know, I went down a couple in my bench. I'm not expecting to just play my first 11 now for the next few weeks and all 11 play every week. So I think that is an important factor as well. I also think that the fixtures themselves lend themselves. So Man City home to Brighton is a very, very, very good fixture. Arsenal, you know, have shown signs of improvement. Palace are no mugs. I do potentially think the Arsenal match is being overhyped a little bit from a defensive perspective because Palace can score goals. You know, they've got some really good players. Obviously, Zaha, Eze, you know, look really, really good. So, but you know, it is a good fixture. Newcastle and Sheffield United as well is a pretty decent fixture there as well.
That's why I like Tierney more than Holding or Leno for this, because I think they may concede, but he's been so attacking in the last couple of game weeks. So I think, and plus I own Holding as well, so I'm going to have him the week after. So I might as well go for something different this week.
Sure. And just a couple of other bits and pieces as well. So I do think there's a chance actually there's some very, very low owned players who could have a massive impact this weekend. So, you know, I think like Lacazette, you know, everyone has been talking about, he's very, very low ownership. Even Sterling at 5%, right? So he's like 5% owned at the moment. It's incredibly low. Home to Brighton, plum fixture for City.
Gundogan, I mean, what's his percentage?
Gundogan, Who does he play? I can't remember. I haven't.
Do you not even not heard of him? No. Somebody mentioned him last week, and I thought I'll get there first before you mentioned.
I wasn't even going to mention it, but what can I say? I think even looking in the first half this evening, watching the Man United game, Gundogan was basically, when City were attacking, he was on a penalty spot waiting for the ball all the time. He scored the offside goal. He nearly had a chance for another one as well. The only thing I would say with Gundogan this week in 18, he's very, very likely not going to be in my free hit team, right? But only because how can you put Gundogan in ahead of Sterling, right? It's nonsensical.
What about Foden? Is Foden going to be there?
No.
Oh, dear.
Gundogan more than Foden.
Your opportunity to
even
have one game.
Even though Foden again earlier was really unfortunate, so he put the cross in for Gundogan, who scored. Okay, he was offside. Foden then scored an off goal. He then scored an offside goal himself. He assisted for the goal himself. I do think Foden's playing well. The problem with Foden is you're not sure if he's going to play or not. Whereas I think Gundogan is far more likely to play. But I think
Gundogan is key to how they play, because we talked about them replacing David Silva, and the only person that is capable, because I think we've said it's not quite worked with the mix of players, but there's a really good article on The Athletic, probably about 6 or 7 months ago, about how they replaced Silva. And about controlling games and slowing them down, increasing the tempo, which is a great skill that Silva had. And I think the only person in the squad that's really got that attribute is Gundogan, and I think he's been brilliant the last few games. And City, I think they've looked more of a team. They were fantastic against Chelsea. They were great tonight. So I think they've definitely got their mojo back.
Yeah, I think they look fantastic, and I think they look a lot more defensively sound as well with Diaz there now as well. They conceded a lot of odd goals last season. The opposition to have one shot and score, whereas this year with Diaz they look very, very good at the back as well. So.
It has been a trait of Pep's sides when they're going for the title that they are quite sound defensively, and I think if anything, this makes them more title contenders by being so defensively sound than if they were beating teams 4 or 5 every week. And I think we talked about it before we come on about Diaz and how good he's been, but they've got that leadership there in the team now. I mean, he's effectively is their captain. You can just see how he's always talking. There's high fives every time they clear the ball, which I think he's instigated. He's absolutely brilliant, and I think he makes a lot of other players great options, the likes of Stones, the likes of Cancelo as well. He's obviously got quite a bit. He seems to be playing more in midfield. So, yeah, I think City, they've got a number of great options in the free hit.
Yeah. No, yeah, I completely agree, and they look superb. They looked, on it. Just to kind of wrap up that part, the only other things I would say, for me personally, and for a lot of other players as well, potentially. So I've got myself in a good position for game week 19 using my bench boost. I really like Arsenal options this week. If I used my transfer to bring in someone like Saka or Lacazette or Tierney or wherever else, I'm not going to want them in 19 and and onwards either. So that's just another small factor for those who are playing the bench boost in 19. And my last point as well is I think there's points in front of us there. I think with the differentials we mentioned, players like Lacazette, Sterling, Saka, even Aguero, right? Now obviously that would be a very big risk, right? But even Aguero, there are so many potential points there, backed up by Bruno Fernandes, Bruyne, Diaz, all the players we've already mentioned. I think it's a really good free hit, so I'm pretty pro free hit. So if you like I say, to kind of wrap up that part, I suppose I think our advice is if you've got 7 good players, and probably safe, but still maybe expect a red arrow. But it's your call. It depends where you are as well. If you're stuck at 4 million. Do you really want another red arrow and then another 10 weeks of trying to play catch up? I just go for it personally. But yeah. So for our YouTube viewers, we're now showing the Game Week 26 fixtures and what they would look like if the team's Game Week 29 fixtures were moved to that Game Week, which is the likely scenario. So just for those who don't know, haven't seen this, the FA Cup, I think, is I want to say the fifth round. Is going to be played in Game Week 29. So
Correct.
what we've done...
No, I think it's a quarterfinals.
Oh, it's the quarterfinals. Apologies.
Yeah, it's the quarterfinals. So.
But yeah, Adam, if you want to kind of, explain your thinking on this graphic.
Yeah, so it's the first thing to be clear is it's not 100% accurate because some of the doubles. So what's happening is that in Game Week 29, the FA Cup fixtures, which is the quarterfinals, is going to mean that a lot of teams or the teams that reach the quarterfinals and the teams that they would have played in the league are going to blank in 29, and the majority of those fixtures will get moved to 26. That's what we're thinking at the moment. That's what's quite likely. So the graphic shows what the potential doubles would be. But if you do look at Game Week 29, you could also see what the potential blank game week could be. And I looked at I think focusing on the potential blank in 29, where others may consider, well, could I use my free hit in that game week? I tweeted the other day and just put these would be the fixtures in 2029. And I think when you look at them and compare them to the one that we have in front of us in 18, you don't see many thrashings in there. No. I think they're quite evenly matched fixtures. We're looking at this week. You think Arsenal possibly could beat Palace comfortably, Burnley and United, Brighton, and obviously Man City. So there's games there where you can think, well, actually, there could be comfortable victories. But if you look at it in Game Week 29, there isn't much to get excited about. I don't personally think. So I think, Man City have got Wolves. That could be quite, you'd fancy them to put more past Brighton. I think Liverpool have got Chelsea. Yeah. So again, not particularly great. So I think Man United are away at Palace. That could be okay. But I think looking at the fixtures, I personally think it lends better to a free hit this week. I think with the doubles as well, I think there isn't going to be a single team that is going to have a really, really attractive double. I think Spurs potentially could do, but that's if the Fulham game gets moved. One of the Fulham games gets moved. They could have is it Burnley and Fulham as opposed to Southampton. So for me, the fixtures aren't as enticing, and that's why I think potentially bench boosting in 19 is a better option. Because you've got West Ham and Leeds have got great fixtures, and they're the cheap. They're the cheap assets. I'd also throw probably Southampton into the mix if they got Leicester away and Leeds away. I think they can get. They've shown how defensively solid they are. The likes of Ings and Adams could cause those teams problems. So, I think for me, whilst I think there could be opportunities in those game weeks, I think the fixtures are nicer. Or the ones in front of us. Now, obviously, the downside to that is we've mentioned COVID. That's a little bit out of our control. And I also think the Champions League, we don't have that at the moment. We don't have European football, but we do in game weeks 26 to 29, so that you can expect more rotation, more players being rested. So
I think that's a really good point. Really good point.
Yeah, so that's why I just don't think the fixtures are as exciting as what we have in front of us. So that's why I would advocate using a chip in 18 and 19 personally.
I think it's it's really valuable to look at this because there's only really if Spurs get Burnley and Fulham right. Okay, you've got one good set of one really mint set of fixtures there, perfect for me for triple captain.
Yeah, exactly.
So it actually works out kind of really well. Yeah, but hopefully this has given everyone a bit of a view on what it may look like if you saved your free hit chip or saved your other chips for this time. There's nothing really stands out. And Adam's point around the Champions League is a superb point. There's no way that all the star players are going to play every 3 days for 6 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, it could end up being such a game week 29 in particular. could end up being a really, really disappointing and underwhelming. Because I think looking at it, depending on who progresses, you could have, it's quite feasible. You have 4 fixtures, which is just trying to work it out. So you could have Villa, Sheffield United, Burnley, Leicester, West Brom, Everton, and and Fulham, Newcastle. You know, that's what it. You just think you'd think, oh, I'll just give up that game week. I'm not going to lose too much. I just don't think you get excited, too excited. I mean, alternatively, you could free hit in one of the double game weeks. That's an option, maybe later down the line. The one point to mention is if anybody is thinking of paying their wild card in 18, which I do think is a valid option, which we'll talk about in a bit. You will, because they will be doing the 4th and 5th round draw of the FA Cup.
They are on Monday night.
Yeah. So prior to the deadline, you could have a bit of an idea as to what game week 29 blank could look like. You'll have a bit of an, look at, obviously everybody on here probably does follow Ben Crellin. If you don't, I'm sure at what time's the draw? 7:30?
Yeah.
It'll be 7:32. You'll have a tweet from Ben Crellin telling you about all the percentages of what blank game week 29 will look like. So, he's very good on that. So I think that could be a useful tool for people planning wildcards, I think.
So talking about wildcards, Adam has produced. So he was still a bit stumped on what to do. So what he did, he produced three scenario teams. So firstly, Adam, now in front of us, we have got your potential wildcard team for game week 18. Do you want to kind of talk us through it?
Yeah, so I mean, this is just I did this fairly quickly, but it was to look at because I think just because I wildcarded in 16. And I think for me, this is quite an important point. There'll be a lot of people who might think, well, because I wildcarded in 16, I can't wildcard now because it's admitting I've wasted my wildcard. Well, in my opinion, that's happened. You can't change it. There was information that came out after the wildcard in terms of the City and United fixtures getting moved. Other players that maybe you selected, like Balbuena losing their place, McCarthy, unfortunately getting COVID, Jay Adams getting kicked in the head. There's been other factors that have maybe, negated all of the moves that you made in your wild card. So for me, I'm not against wild carding. And I think there could be some really, really good benefits to it in terms of it would make a better bench boost. I think given, I think that's a huge positive. I think I can actually get it, so I can get 11 out in game week 18 as well.
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite as good as what I would have on free hit, but I don't think it's much off. I think it's possible that it could beat it. So I'll talk you through. I put a wildcard team together fairly quickly. So the goalkeepers I would go for are Martinez. I've put Sam Johnston in there. The other one that I would consider for future double game weeks is it Ariola at Fulham? Yeah, so you've got 2 double game weeks or multiple coming up so I think he's an option. I like Sam Johnston. The reason is that listening to all the comments from Sam Allardyce, it could be an easy one to say, well, they're conceding too many goals. Yeah, they are at the moment. But all he's talked about is we've got to get a clean sheet. We've got to get a clean sheet. Forget attacking. We're not going to attack. We just need a clean sheet. And I think he's always good for saves, Sam Johnston. So the ceiling is really high for him. And history has shown us that Allardyce produces defensive side. So I'd expect them to become more defensive, whether they stay up or not. I've then gone double City defence in Diaz and Cancelo. I think after tonight, it cements that. And I think their fixtures coming up after game week 19 and the double, they've got the 3 worst attacking sides. So I think for me, that's a bit of a no-brainer. I've gone for Wan-Bissaka and Tierney and Kufal to help with the defence. I think Wan-Bissaka has great fixtures for United. It's got a double next week as well. Kufal has obviously got a good double next week. And I think Tierney was outstanding against West Brom. He was good the week before. He just seems to really have excelled playing left back. And then midfield, I've got De Bruyne, Fernandes, Rashford. It could be Rashford or Son. I don't think that matters too much. Souček and Grealish. Grealish is a little concerned because he got 4 yellow cards, and that's in. I don't think he'll get a 5th one because of the type of player he's got. 3 of his 4 yellow cards have come from arguing with the ref, and he just needs to curb it a little bit. And I'm sure Dean Smith would have had a word with him. And then I've gone for Bamford, Lacazette, and Watkins up front. So the thought process is that I can get 11 out in game week 18, but I think coming out, and I'd probably take a -4 in game week. Game week 19 for the bench boost. So I'd probably look at Rashford or Son, whoever I go for, and Lacazette to Salah or Mane, and I think it's Che Adams or Rodrigo, type player. But I think what it does do is when I'm coming out the other side, my team is set up really nicely for those 3 or 4 game weeks. The downside to it, and actually I've put this team versus my free hit team and my current squad into a few different tools, including the Hubs prediction tool, and there's very little in it. And I think there are similar positives to wildcard as there are to free hitting, and I think what it's ultimately going to come down to for me is, would I rather have a free hit or wildcard left long term? The safer option is the wildcard, but I can see the benefits of having a free hit over a wildcard, and I think even Ben Crellin tweeted that it might be a better chip to have, because you then just building. You're just playing the game for the long term consistently. You can potentially free hit in the double game week as well if your team is set up for the blank. So I don't think there is actually as much in it as I probably thought before. I was very set on I'm going to free hit and then wildcard. Sorry, wildcard later on, maybe 25.
I completely disagree with the free hit against the wildcard going on later. We've already mentioned about all the doubles, European football, and everything else, right? So while a wildcard now would see you through, maybe nicely to game week 24 or 25, with what is going on, you're likely going to be having to use your free transfer every week to firefight every week. It's going to be very hard to move your team on, I think, in a positive manner. Whereas if you save your wildcard back for 25, you can set your team up, very nicely, obviously, for 26. You can also have 29 in mind. You can also have a complete refresh, which, if you think how much our teams have changed in the last fortnight, I know it's Christmas, so, it's a bit of a strange time like that. But I think scrapping every single week to try and get 11 decent players out just for the fact of having one good game week, for me, in the final 17 game weeks of the season, to me just doesn't work. But that's my opinion.
So I prefer it in a way when I don't have a wild card, and this it might sound a little bit illogical, but I find it easier to play because my team.
I know what you mean.
No, but my team, so my team pre-wildcard, I think it was set up with Son, KDB, Salah, and Bruno. It had three cheap strikers, which is pretty much what I'm going to end up reverting back to anyway. And I think you throw Souček in there as well, which it didn't have. So I mean, it was good bringing him in. But I think the one positive you do get to around this part of the season is you get to know the players that you think you can trust long term. You start to see the patterns in the season, and I think it's between this roundabout, maybe 2-3 game weeks ago to toward I think the middle of the season you start to see it. So if you're building a wild card team, I think for me at the moment it would make sense to have the 3 big guns in Salah, Fernandes and De Bruyne. You're always going to have a captaincy that you can rotate. I would go cheap with the strikers. I would probably have set up to have 5 playing midfielders based on what we've said and spread. So maybe go with like Souček and a Saka, for example. I'd be happy with them long term. So I think there's
I'm smiling because you basically just read out my team.
Well, there you go. There you go. Maybe you don't need your wild card. Maybe it causes more hassle than it's worth. But I think also as well with the doubles, people get obsessed with the doubles and they overplay them. And I think particularly if some of the better teams don't have doubles, sometimes you're better off having the single game week players, and you can use your free hit in a double if you want to. It's and just forget game week 29. So I'm torn. I think because I can see that this would take me through to game weeks 26, 27 comfortably, and then I can gradually build my team from there. And if I've got 15 playing players, you're not too worried about things called up. The problem with this team, though, is I'm reliant on a couple of teams, like Villa and City mainly. And I think having reflected on it and looking at it and putting them in the various tools, there's so little difference that I think the safer option is to free hit and then wild card later on.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's what I keep going back to. I think there's probably a little bit too much risk in this. But I do think it's a possible strategy. I know others have looked at it, and I actually do. I think it's viable, particularly if you were going to bench boost and then you've had 4 or 5 things happen. I don't think you should be against resetting your team to do that and then bench boost in 19.
I personally think it's madness, but obviously respect your and everyone else's opinion who thinks wildcard and 18 is a good idea. I think it's crazy. We're less than halfway through the season, and there's so much football to play. There's so much things that are going to happen. There's so many double game weeks. We're going to have a lot more issues. There's Champions League going to be back, and I think to put all your eggs in one basket, which I think is what basically I think wildcard and 18 are doing. They're trying to maximise 18 and 19, and then they're kidding themselves then by saying that they're setting themselves up for the next few weeks. By the time the merits of this team run out, there's still going to be 15 game weeks left, in my opinion, which includes a blank and multiple doubles. So I just think it's madness personally. But anyway, that's wildcard then. Now on to the exciting parts. I think
the free
hit teams. Which is good. So again, Adam has built 2 free hit teams for us with one significant difference in both.
I think they're pretty. I mean, they're pretty much the same. Yeah. It comes down to Rashford versus Sterling. That's the big difference. I think the what I would look to have, and whether I want double City defense or double City attack. That's all it comes down to. I think the key players, and I know you probably put both of them on the screen, but the key players that are pretty much in both. My forward line is pretty easy to go through. It's Lacazette and Wilson.
Yeah.
I don't see that changing. I think I've said before, I don't like owning Callum Wilson because of Newcastle, but they're playing Sheffield United. I think I can have him for 1 week. I'm okay with that. And I think Sheffield United have been poor. I'm probably and I think and Lacazette, I think he's on fire at the moment. His stats are great.
Yeah.
Hopefully he won't play in the FA Cup and it will give him more confidence. He'll definitely start. Because I think there is a possible slight rotation risk with Martinelli. But it's a free hit, isn't it? So you can take the odd risk. So I think he has been rejuvenated the last 3 or 4 weeks. So I quite like the Lacazette punt. I think midfielders, the absolute stalwarts at the moment are De Bruyne, Fernandes, Son, and Saka, and then it would be either Sterling or Rashford. I think Saka's looked really good since he's moved over to the other side. I think his link-up play with Lacazette and Smith Rowe has been very good as well. So I've always liked Saka, actually. I think he was excellent for England. We talked about him last week.
Yeah,
really like him. Just like him as a footballer. So it'd be nice to have him in for that week. I think Son is more suited against Villa than Kane, personally. I think he's cheaper as well. So, yeah, and actually, I think his form has been exceptional all season. So I think he slightly edges Kane because he's cheaper and he allows me to do more with the money by having him. And I think he's a better option than Rashford and Sterling, full stop, because he's consistently produced all season. And whereas they've both been very up and down, I think. So Son is definitely in for me. I actually hope he blanks still, but yeah, exactly. I'll have him in there anyway. Maybe a consolation goal. I'll allow him that. And then I think obviously Bruno and KDB is a bit of a no-brainer. I think there'll be two, and I think most people will have them. And then defence, the key people for me, Tierney, really like him. I think he's been. I think from an attacking point of view, he's quite exciting. So, I'd say the other thing that, because I'll have 3 Arsenal in my free hit, psychologically going into the last game of the game week with 3 Arsenal, if you're going in with a green arrow already, you've pretty much guaranteed it. Don't you think though? But that was
definitely
a little bit of, and I think it's been a big plus for 3 hitters that they have picked up. I think one option that's possibly being overlooked, and I'm not having him, so I can include myself, I suppose, in that, is Zaha. I think he's capable of scoring in any game. So, and then the other defenders, I think if I go double City, it'll be Cancelo and Diaz. And the other ones that I am considering as alternatives, if I go for Sterling, would be Wan-Bissaka or Maguire and Roman Saiss. I think Saiss he's got a lot of upside from goal threat. I think from set pieces. I think the only thing I'm wary with Wolves is that they've got a lot of injuries at the moment. So that puts me off a little bit. And I also think it's a game that's very difficult to predict. I think out of all of the games this game week, I think you can maybe say that with Spurs Villa, but I think both teams will score in that game. I think Everton have been like that all season. You don't know what you're going to get with them.
Yeah.
And Wolves to an extent as well. So I think that's the hardest game to predict. So I probably think, like a lot of people, have stayed away from that. And then goalkeepers, it's between De Gea. I think there is. I think with the goalkeepers, this is quite a tricky one. I think because I can't have Leno, and I'd actually think Palace. There's a possibility Palace might score. So I can't have Leno because I've got Tierney, and I've got 2 other Arsenal players. So that rules him out because he would have been a good option. I think Martinez. I think Spurs will score, so that rules him out, and he's highly owned anyway, so that'd be a boring pick. So I think looking at goalkeepers is quite a tough one because there is a slight risk with De Gea that he doesn't play, and I think it's minimal. But then I can't. If you go De Gea, you can't really afford to have another bench keeper. Particularly if you've got Sterling in you could possibly get Sanchez at Brighton, but he's going to concede loads, isn't he? So you might as well not have anyone. So that is a little bit of a worry. And I think Darlow at Newcastle as well. I actually think he's been really, really good this season. But Dubravka's back, isn't he? And again, there's always that possibility. I don't think it will happen. I think it would be very, very harsh on him. So that could be, if I did go with Darlow, I'd be checking the forums. But I think that Sheffield United will score against Newcastle.
Okay.
This is going purely off gut feeling. Yeah. I think it's such a big game for them that at some point they have to have a reaction, and it hasn't happened yet. But they are going to be targeting that fixture and doing everything to go and win the game. It's a 6-pointer for them. They have to get 6. They have to get not 6 points. They have to get 3 points from that game. And I think Wilson's fine because I think if they go in for it, Newcastle might get the odd chance. And if Newcastle score, Wilson will be involved. But I think I don't know if I want to start a Newcastle defender. As bad as Sheffield United have been going forward, I just think there's so much riding on that game for them. So that's sort of my thought process on free hit at the moment.
And the key sort of difference between your free hit one team and free hit two is, so you've got Sterling in one, and then you've got Rashford in the other, and your Rashford team has got a little bit more of a bench. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly that. There is also a possibility, and I'll wait till near the deadline. So the FA Cup news will play a big part in this, and obviously any subsequent news that comes out of it prior to the game week on Tuesday. But there is also a possibility that I may not have Rashford or Sterling, and I may go for a few other players and not worry about spending the whole budget, because I think sometimes you can get you can worry about, well, I've got to spend every penny. So I mean, Grealish is a really, really good option, I think. Grealish, and I think the form he's in at the moment, he's in better for me. He's playing better than both Sterling and Rashford, and I think so. To overlook him might be just because I've got the funds to go up to a Rashford. Yeah, it might be. I could be overlooking him there.
Sterling looks hopeless at the moment. Sterling, I don't know why he's insisting on playing him on the right hand side, but his final ball is shooting. He just loses the ball. But if there's one game to like stick him on, it's against a Brighton team who are not the best defensively. They don't just sit in camp and put 10 men behind the ball like other teams do. It just seems a bit of a waste, kind of not to put him in when you've got him basically for free, and when his ownership is so low as well. If he scores a couple of goals, he could be a massive green arrow just by himself, couldn't he?
Yeah, he could be, and he's in my thoughts. And I don't think he's been as bad as you said, to be honest. I think he's getting into some very, very good position. I think tonight there were quite a few times that he could have been played in by De Bruyne or Gundogan, and for whatever reason he wasn't picked out. He's always had the issue with his end product. It's not really a new thing for him. But I thought he did okay versus Chelsea. My worry with Sterling is, and again, this is what you just want him to be benched for that FA Cup game.
Yeah,
because if he isn't, so what could happen, and there is this risk with Man City, irrespective. Say you go Cancelo and Sterling, both could be benched versus Brighton. It's so, particularly, let's say that with Cancelo, for example, he plays him in the FA Cup because Walker isn't quite fit enough, and then he puts Walker in v Brighton. So there is definitely that possibility.
I think this is why also having a bench, no matter how weak the bench is, I think having some kind of bench is quite important, because we miss, especially with City, as we know, right? Picking the right three, especially with Aguero and Jesus are both back now, right? Sterling has played a lot of minutes recently. Diaz has played practically every single game. Cancelo's played every game. We've been talking about this, which is all well and good. But with the other players now that are coming back, Mendy's back fit as well. Walker's back. Aguero, Jesus. It's going to be a bit of a lottery, I think.
I think the big thing for me with City and probably United and all the teams involved is going to be looking at those FA Cup fixtures and the lineups. And I think if some of the key men are left out, I'll be more likely to go for them.
Yeah,
but City's the big one, because I think the thing to be wary of is if you do go Sterling, he eats up a lot of your budget and it will weaken your bench. And if it weakens your bench and he doesn't play, you're going to be absolutely gutted. So I think if he doesn't have any involvement the weekend, that's a good thing, and I think he'll be involved for Brighton. But the other thing to mention with Sterling is that he has been left out occasionally for these home bankers.
He has. Huddersfield, wasn't it? And Watford, was it?
Yeah, Watford. I mean, but did he play against? He missed one of them recently, didn't he?
Can't remember. I think. Yeah, I get the feeling he's.
Did he miss the Burnley game when Mahrez got a hat trick?
I'm not sure. I think
he might have done. So I think it'll really, really depend on the FA Cup in terms of what I go for. I've got the main players. I think the big one that I've been not having in my team is Harry Kane, but I'm comfortable with that.
I am as well, especially if you've got Son. Kane's a really good option, but we've mentioned a few times now on the podcast that Son is, especially if you bought him early, like you did, right? So your value at the moment is 9.4. He's something like 9.7 or 9.8. So
Yeah.
if you got him early at 9.4, he's just a steal. That's the only thing I would say was surprised that in your wildcard team that you didn't have Son, but then you did mention obviously between kind of Rashford and Son. But Son for me is just a season keeper. I just think he's all he needs is a goal, and he's got 9 or 10 points, and he scores in the majority of games.
Well, that's the problem I'll have. So I think going through my strategy, one of the other reasons for considering looking at the wild card is that because of Balbuena, because I've got Son and Kane currently, who have single games in game week 19, and they don't have particularly good fixtures coming out of it as well. I'm probably going to have to take a -8 to get the team that I want, which I don't think. I think it's fine. I think a lot of people will be -4 in and -8 in anyway for the bench boost, and I actually want to get the bench boost out of the way because I think it's easier to play without it. But I think but what you've mentioned on Son, my plan for 19 is at the moment will be to do Son to De Bruyne, Kane to potentially Adams, and then bring in Cancelo or Diaz for Balbuena. So I think they're all fairly solid transfers, but it means losing Son again. But I don't think you can't. It'll be the choice will be between Son and Salah. And I think with Salah having a double, 2 home games, it's hard to it'll be painful viewing that week, not having Salah for 2 home games. And I think the last game of the game week is Thursday night, where they're at home to Burnley. So that would be, I wouldn't be able to watch that game, I don't think.
The Iceman is in the chat from FPL Surgery. He says, boys, that is my free hit team. Can you change it, please? And he says he's never seen us live before. James, I'm not impressed. You haven't seen us live before, but he does say we look as sexy as we do on video. So there we go. Thank you very much for that. So on screen now, we've now got the team which has been picked by the Fantasy Football Hub prediction tool. So if anyone hasn't used it, you go onto Fantasy Football Hub and members can use a points prediction tool. And the team which it spits out, so it's worth saying that this is the affordable team it spits out, a maximum of 3 players, but it's Leno in goals, Wan-Bissaka, Tierney and Diaz at the back, Sterling, De Bruyne, Fernandes, Rashford. It actually picks out Grealish, which is quite interesting. It did pick out Saka ahead of Grealish, but obviously that would be for Arsenal. So Grealish slots in there, and then we've got Watkins and Lacazette up front. So that's a 3-5-2, and that team is very similar to what we've been talking about, right? It's that kind of Wan-Bissaka, Tierney, Diaz, Sterling, De Bruyne, Bruno, Rashford or Son, Lacazette, kind of Watkins or Wilson. So that kind of 9, that 8 or 9 players, that core free hit team, I think it's fairly obvious. We'll move on to our actual teams now going into game week 18, but it seems to be quite straightforward, I suppose. The only real issue we've got, which could really change the makeup of a team, as we've mentioned, is if you went, Sterling. It's having 2 out of Sterling, Rashford, and Son, really, in it. And if you go for Sterling and Rashford or Son, that's probably going to be the makeup of your team. If you go for Son and Rashford and no Sterling, you can probably afford to upgrade elsewhere.
I think the ceiling for Sterling is higher than Rashford, in my opinion.
I'd agree with that.
But then you can have 2 City. But then the other thing is, it wouldn't be impossible for Brighton to score. I mean, that would be very, very unpopular. But you never know, do you? And particularly if you've got double defence, all it takes is
a last minute goal like Chelsea did on the weekend against Man
Yeah,
City.
just like it's exactly. So, and to be fair to Cancelo, he's pretty good at dodging points. He's been getting a few.
Oh, he's been so unlucky. He's been playing really advanced. He's been having shots,
Yeah,
slamming in crosses that they just can't, kind of finish and stuff. But yeah. A couple in the chat have asked about Smith Rowe as an option. Now, I just think, go for Saka, right? He's starting, he's proven, his stats are the best for Arsenal that they've been, over the last 4 or 6 game weeks. Have you got any thoughts at all, Adam? On
I really like it. Really like him as a player. I think the second goal that Arsenal scored was absolutely stunning, and that third man run was fantastic. I think so. I do actually like him as a player, and I think where he could be useful is say if you were playing 3-4-3, or you had then he would be the perfect fifth midfielder, and you weren't trebling up on Arsenal as your first sub. I think that's where he could be really, really useful. I agree with you. I'd go Saka over him if you have the funds. But if you're going 3-4-3 and you need a cheap sub, I think he's good. I think if he keeps his place long term as well, we're talking about free hits here, obviously, but he could be an absolute bargain later on in the season. Because you don't see him losing his place at the moment. Because I actually think he's been a really key link for Arsenal, because that is the position where they've obviously had the two other midfielders alongside, but that person that can link up play, that can go box to box, it's probably more Ramsey than Ozil, I would suggest. But I think they've just missed it, and I think he's been key for them. So yeah, I really like him as an option, like him as a player, and I think he is one of the reasons Arsenal have improved.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think Arsenal, like United have a bit, like City have recently as well. I think they've turned it around. I think what we're going to start to see, for me, from kind of here on in now, is the better teams, or the traditionally better teams that have got good squads that have kind of been there and done it before as well. I think we're going to see more clean sheets, and I think we're going to see the better teams now. If you think of the teams who have been doing well this season, I don't mean to diss Villa in this, because I would probably say Villa, maybe Leeds, are an exception due to their fitness levels. But I do think we'll see some of this team, other of the teams start to tail off now. Whereas, like we say, Arsenal, City, United will keep on going, and I think we'll see them.
I think now is quite a good period for them, because between now until when they have the Champions League, the Premier League is gonna and Europe, the Premier League is gonna be their priority. They've obviously just got the Europa League, the League Cup out the way as well. So I think now is always quite a good period. I agree with you. I think investing more in premium defenders. We've talked about Tierney. We've talked about Man City. I think going for the premium or defenders, I think will get you the returns.
And the thing is as well, there's no real premium attackers. Oh, you've got Kane, you've got Vardy, potentially Aguero, right? But I think if you've got, if you've got a midfield of Salah, Son, Bruno, and De Bruyne, I don't think you need a premium striker, right? You can have 3 premium defenders, those 4 key midfielders, 3 or 4 of them, and Soucek, and you've got like Bamford, who's performing as a kind of 9 or 10 million striker anyway. We talked to death about Watkins, Calvert-Lewin. They're all performing very, very well for their price. So I think moving forward, I'll definitely be looking to shift a bit of funds at the back, keep it into midfield, and keep it nice and cheap up top. Personally, but anyway, we're going off on a tangent now. Good evening as well to Flapjack is in the chat as well from FPL Surgery. We're being dominated by the surgery guys, but welcome all.